of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Welcome everyone to the fourth installment of the Sinister Six set from Epic Prop, which as you can see is Superior Spiderman. As always, links to his Patreon are in the description below. Please go check him out, and here we go. As always, start with the base. I'm going to start this one with oak brown as a nice base coat for the mud and dirt. I'll mix in a little black to get into those recessed areas, make it a little bit darker. Then on top of that, I put on some mud brown or any light brown to bring up the highlights of this area. It's a dark and stormy night, so getting this super bright isn't that important. To finish up this part of the base, I just dry brushed on some olive green. This isn't a manicured lawn, so it just needs to look like there's something there besides mud. For stone pieces, my recipe is pretty simple. Start with a gray primer, and I go over that with a gray-blue base coat. From there, while it's still kind of wet, I go over that with a light gray. This is kind of a mix between dry brushing and wet blending. I get into the recesses, but I'm also covering more than just the high spots. Maybe dry blending or wet brushing, maybe? I don't know. I'm sure there's some weird artsy name for this technique. But moving right along, I use ash gray and actually dry brush this on and just hit all the high spots on the entire piece. I'm also doing this to the headstone, I'm just not recording it. I let that dry and come back with a dark stone paint from Army Painter. I water this down just a little bit and use it more like a wash than a paint. I'll get into the recesses, into the cracks, into just other random areas that I think will add depth and character to the part. I'll let this sit for a couple of seconds and then I'll either wipe it off or use a paper towel to spread it around a little bit and just kind of rub it in. This gives it more natural color transitions. Once this is done, I'll let that paint dry. I'll put on a varnish, let that dry. Then I grab the soft tone wash. I put this on everywhere, especially on stone, because it helps blend all those previous layers together and it turns out really nice. But I put this on pretty thick, let it sit for a couple of seconds, let some of it dry, and then I found these little pink sponges in the bathroom and they work great for getting up the excess. I told my wife about it and she lost her mind. I mean, she just couldn't believe that I would use those and get these results. I mean, she was so amazed. She was speechless the rest of the night. There was just simply no words to express how she felt about it. So there's two products that I'm very excited about. It's the rust effect and moss effect from Dirty Down. I want to give a big thanks to my patron Paul for letting me know about these products. He showed me an example of them and I ordered them immediately. These things are just amazing. This rust was applied by itself over a single color base coat. You can apply it thicker to get it darker, you apply it thinner for lighter shades, but that's it, all by itself, just that one product. The same thing goes for the moss. You get all the shading from just how thick or thin you apply it. I'm going to be doing a separate video just on these products alone. There's also a link in the description for King Games where you can get these for the best price on the internet. It's a two-person shop right out of their home in Denmark, and the customer service is phenomenal. Alright, so moving right along. For the roses, I started with Hive till they're purple, getting the insides and the bottoms. I got this tip and tutorial from my friend Becky over at FigureFortress. I'll put links to her Instagram and YouTube channel in the description. Please go check her out. She just started her YouTube channel and this lady is amazing. She paints things so tiny that you have to have frog hair brushes to even get paint on them in the first place. Go check her out once you finish this video, of course. For the first red layer, I used Barn Red craft paint. Followed that up with multiple dry brush layers of Vallejo Vermilion Red, just for the highlights. I had a great teacher, but I think with a little more practice, I could have got a lot better results. For a real organic look, you want to go with multiple thin coats versus what I did here, which was a very few thick coats of paint. So Becky, I'm sorry. I'll continue to work on these and do better next time, I promise. For the stems, I just went with a basic low, mid, high color scheme. Started with olive green, followed by green skin from Army Painter, and then onto scale 75, drop in paint, Irati green. And no, that's not an actual product picture. The drop in paint was a Kickstarter last year that I picked up, and they're not commercially available as of yet. To give the base a wet and rainy look, I put UV resin glue into all the deep cracks and let it cure as it flowed through them. After that was all cured, I sprayed the entire base with high gloss varnish to give it a wet look and to protect it. Superior Spiderman has a cool backpack that holds his robotic arms. I'm guessing there's some sort of nanotechnology involved because they really don't fit inside there if you try to fold them up. The model comes with two different backpacks, one with holes for the arms to attach and the other without. I painted both the same, or at least as similar as I could. Since I was going with a metallic, I started with a gloss black base coat, followed by dark aluminum from Vallejo's metal color line. This stuff works really well. It's super thin, sprays through an airbrush like a dream without any thinning. For the red, I use custom creative Pain Red from spraygunner.com. I use dark aluminum and black to paint the details on the backpack. I weathered some of the areas and some of the edges by scratching off the red, leaving some of the metallic to show through. Use a soft tone to dirty it up a little bit, give it a little grime, a little grit. This thing's been through the ringer today. After this dried and was varnished, I used some pastels to weather it a little bit more. Brushing this into all the little nooks and crannies and areas that look like it would collect dirt. Then I sealed it all up with the varnish. Now for Spidey himself. Or is it Doc Ock? Anyway, start with a matte black base coat. Get all the little nooks and crannies for all those little spider webs on him. Once that dried, I masked them off in AK Interactive Camo Putty. This stuff is amazing. If you don't have any, I highly recommend you pick some up. You can get it from spraygunner.com. Link is in the description. I'm using the same custom creative red paint that I used for the backpack. Because of the way it's posed, it made more sense to start with the highlight color and then go over the top of that with the darker tones, just to make it easy on myself. And for those darker tones, I used Mission Model's Red Oxide. Sprayed the whole front of him because he's all hunched over and that's all going to be his shadow. I also used that to darken the creases on his back to add those accents. Don't forget his head. Did the exact same thing to his head. Once he was dried and varnished, I started painting the logo and other details on his outfit with gloss black. I would have taped all this off using Tamiya tape, but that would have taken, I don't know, maybe a day or two. So instead, what I used was Mad Skills. In all seriousness, painting these details is very time consuming and does take a while. It took me about 2 coats to get everything just right. Could have been sprayed on a whole lot faster, but again, it really would have taken a little while to get all this taped up, especially with the way this model is oriented with his hands blocking off most of his body and his chest area. It would have just taken way too much time. So yeah, I just took my time and let the brush do its magic. For the bracers on his arm, go back with the good old dark aluminum again. Just be slow if you're going to brush this on to make sure there's no brush marks. I'll paint the light on his armband with paint red. I know I keep using these same colors, but they just fit the bill this time. I had no reason to use a different shade. I just dotted some on, let the paint self-level, and laid the model on its side overnight to let that dry. And I did the other one the same way the next day. Now it's time for the dreaded webbing, the bane of any Spider-Man model. Epic did these right by making them super recessed. That just made it so much easier to paint. Most people would use panel liner for these, but I found that it was much easier to just use a brush with Tamiya Smoke. I did try the panel liner, but it got into the textures on the suit and I didn't like that. It started messing with the color. That's when you always test in an area that gets covered up later. I needed to apply 2 coats of this just to get it dark enough. Otherwise you could still see the red through it. Because after all, it's smoke clear, so it's not black. I printed the spider legs in clear resin and used Tamiya clear red over them. Put on 2 coats and then followed that up with 2 coats of high gloss varnish. I did go back after filming and spread a super light coat of shiny silver on the front side of these and a light coat of the Tamiya Smoke on the back side just to give it a little extra shadow. Now it's time to make it rain. Using a silicone brush cleaner, which I found next to the makeup sponges I had earlier, a paint dropper top
On the stick.
and UV resin glue. I picked up this technique from some friends over in Discord, though they suggested that I use a toothpick, and I tried that, but I found that the plastic dropper top was much easier to clean and to reuse than a toothpick. So the trick is you get a little bit of resin onto the top of the bottle top,
On the stick.
place it on the model, start curing it while you lift up on the bottle top or whatever toothpick thing you're using, and let it cure, and it ends up looking like a drop. Sometimes it doesn't fully harden all the way up and it will curl over like it just did. You can easily just snip that off. And sometimes it cures way faster than you're expecting, and your bottle top or your toothpick gets stuck to it and you have to just cut it off. Other times it just doesn't work at all. It doesn't stick to the model, cures to the tip of your applicator. You know, whatever happens, happens. But if you varnish your model like you're supposed to, you can easily get the cured resin off with tweezers and give it another try. I highly recommend that you test this a few times before you actually try to do this to your model. I did, and I still ended up with some issues, but I think that's just how these things work. But I did learn a lot when I was testing to try to get my technique to where it needed to be to get more successes than failures. Next, I added water drops to the headstones to look like rainwater was running down the side of them. This was done similar to the raindrops. I put UV resin glue where I wanted the drops to go, let it run down a little bit, and then hit it with a UV light. I really recommend using the resin glue because it's a little bit thicker than like printing resin. Also, the printing resin, because it's so thin, when you try to cure it, sometimes it'll shoot off to the side. You can actually see on the side here where I use printing resin, and it's got a little hook on the side. I peeled that off so you don't really see it unless the UV light hits it, which is a good thing, but if you really want to do the raindrops, I highly recommend using the glue instead. Now it's time for my favorite part of the video. Let's get those glamour shots and close-ups. I want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel. Your contributions are the raindrops on the headstone of my social life that had to die so I could start making these videos.
On the stick.
All kidding aside, I do really appreciate you guys. Also appreciate all the help that you give me when I'm making these models. If you're new to the channel and you like what you see, hit those like and subscribe buttons. Seeing those numbers go up keeps my ego fed long enough to do the next video. Thanks for watching. Remember to keep an eye out for those dirty down videos in the next character in the series, which I promise is going to be lit.